So our first guest lecturer will take us through the topic politics and law. Politics and law. Being a woman leader in African politics. Okay? She'll be taking us through the topic politics and law, women in political leadership, standing out in a male-dominated environment. You would all agree with me that, like I did mention from last week, for most of our political leaders that we'll find in Africa, they are always men. And politics generally is a male-dominated endeavor. We are going to be speaking to one lady who has stood tall in the midst of a lot of men. And she will be talking to us coming from the background of ethics, leadership, and responsibility. Our guest lecturer for this morning is a former Deputy Minister of Transport. She's a lawyer by profession, and she's currently the special aide to the former president, John Dramani Mahama. So, with a round of applause, let us welcome Joyce Bawah Mogtari.
I think you are even more distinguished than I anticipated. And it's actually my privilege to be here with all of you this morning. I think it's my very first time coming up this way, and I was pretty much very surprised when I arrived here and realized that you have built this very beautiful haven here for all of you. It's an amazing place, a great facility for education and learning. Well, I'm sure because of the road, you probably stay indoors all the time. At least it will force you to work even harder. Thank you very much, Eugene, for those kind words. And thank you for having me. I actually didn't know that you guys had such a fancy environment. I would have actually put my paper into at least some slides so that it'll be easier for you to follow. But hopefully, don't worry, we can make it a very interactive session, and then you can engage or join me as you please. I'm Joyce Bawah Mogtari. I don't know whether I'm being described currently as a woman in politics or as a politician or as a lawyer, a mother, a wife, name it. I think I probably wear many caps. But this morning, I'd like to spend an hour with all of you, speaking to you largely about ethics, about our challenges, especially as women. And I'm happy to observe that there are quite a number of women in this room. That's credit to the nature of this campus, and I'm particularly delighted that there's so many of you here today. So certainly, it is not always easy to stand out in our very, very male-dominated environment. But of course, you can't miss my 6-foot frame, and when I wear heels, I'm at least 6'3". So it's very difficult even when I walk past you for you not to notice that someone at least has walked past you. But not all of us are born with this height or this trajectory. So certainly, it means then that society must do something, encourage some space, allow for some opportunities, and even in some cases, even ensure that there's a certain equity, a certain equality, a certain avenue to invite and encourage more participation by women. I don't think that genuinely that in any country, for example, that anybody has deliberately sidelined women. No. I don't think particularly there are still any laws in the world today that prevent women from going anywhere or doing whatever it is that pleases you. It is particularly insightful that this particular university focuses largely on sciences, technology. I love the entrepreneurship bit because in the past when we were students, entrepreneurship was really not a thought subject. You will have, for example, marketing, you will have public relations, and all of these other things. But I believe that the world is going places and things are certainly changing. So it's actually important that institutions such as yours will start to focus more on things that are marketable, what the future portends for all of us. And technology has become one of the mainstays of our society. It is insightful to see many young entrepreneurs, for example, marketing whatever sorts of wares or talents you possess via the internet, whether it's through Instagram, Twitter, and all of the other many WhatsApp platforms that you belong to. I believe that since we are just currently still almost seeing the last vestiges of the pandemic, all of you have benefited from the virtual classes, and you've seen what data and internet facilities can do. Apparently, you have a very huge international group here, so you all know the value of what it is like to stay at home, take your lectures, take your lessons. And I love seeing my son telling me that he's currently in class, and I open the door and I don't see anybody. But at least I hear voices via the computer or whatever it is he's using. It tells you that many people are able now to engage in many ways. I think the pandemic has also built a certain resilience in each one of us. It tells you there's a lot more we can do without necessarily making physical contact. So certainly, there are great opportunities, for example, in technology, and I think that we should commend persons such as your institutions for the vision to deliver and see our country, specifically this side of the world, develop at a certain breakneck speed, and of course, to improve on each and every facet of our lives generally. I want to believe that focusing on STEM, for example, specifically the mathematics, and seeing all of you women here tells me that things are changing. And of course, today is Professor Kaufman's birthday. She's made the National Science and Math Quiz very, very attractive. I don't know how many of you follow the National Science and Math Quiz. She's a fantastic professor of mathematics, smart, bright woman, and just everybody's kind of woman, really. And we would like to see many more of such women in this room as you leave here. So I'm very hopeful that eventually the academic city would improve our lives, would change our lives, and transform how we see ourselves and how we do things generally. Considering that you all represent a very new paradigm shift, a change that we all anticipate, one that we all expect to see eventually, I am hopeful that you'll find ways not just to stay at school and do well and pass your exams, but you would find ways to at least impact your communities and your society even as you go along. I remember reading about Mark Zuckerberg in particular and finding out that he actually conceived of this idea whilst a first-year student in a university. I believe that Microsoft founder likewise left school even because he realized that what he had in mind, his vision for his life, was bigger than whatever it was he was studying. I believe that Bill Gates has a similar story. And many of you here are representative of all these individuals that we see. And I do know that many young students of your kind are facilitating great things and doing amazing things. You know, politics is great, but I think politics without a particular focus, without something that is actually within you, something that is yours, a faculty that you can still do many other things with, it will just be flat and just simply be politics. I believe what we want to see are politicians who have a vision, who have a certain character, who believe in ethics, who have integrity, who actually want to make a difference in the lives of the people, whether it is in local governance, it is in public governance, name it. I believe that Ghana, like everywhere else, has struggled and continue to struggle to at least improve upon the visibility, not just of its citizens, but of course, of our females in this public space. Yes, we've all heard the stories about Ya Santwa and her historic exploits during the wars, pre-colonial era. We've heard about all the females who participated in the struggle for our independence well over 60 years ago. We also do know that there are many individuals who have achieved firsts in many fields of endeavor, in medicine, in law, in finance, name it. And recently, I was particularly proud when I found out that one of our eminent jurists, the late Justice Aide Age, had a whole street in Switzerland named after her for her exploits, not in law, not in the matter of women, but of course her participation and contribution to her church. So there's many ways that women have achieved singular honors across the length and breadth of this country. And of course, internationally as well. So my topic is particularly very interesting. It says to look at women and political leadership, standing out in a male-dominated environment. I'm sure that whilst you've all been here, you have actually experienced what runs through this theme for this morning. And I must say, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that it must be very, very tough every now and then. First, being female. Secondly, being a female politician. Thirdly, being born this side of the world. As we grapple with lack of employment, with matters to do with challenges with employment and jobs, it makes it even more difficult to operate in this environment. And I think that one of the main facets of our lives really is the representation that we have. You know, for example, that in Ghana, our parliament has 275 members of parliament. Of that number, only 40 of them, 20 on each side, are actually female. And of course, parliament, in terms of the 1992 constitution, is an embodiment of where all decisions are made that affect and trickle down to all of us. I remember recently there was a huge debate about the number of women who had actually been appointed or nominated by His Excellency the President as DCs and municipal chief executives. And we found out that the numbers were woefully inadequate. You ask yourself whether it is the political parties that should be blamed, or it is the fact that we still have not passed the affirmative action bill. Almost 30 years after the Beijing platform, and I believe that at the time most of you were probably very young, it was a platform that actually gave a great opportunity for women on a very high level in Beijing to start to open doors and encourage and motivate women to do more to challenge the status quo. I think that we are all products of this great conference, and we continue to make strides and efforts, even though I think there's still more we can do. Our Ghanaian constitution, for example, is an embodiment of wisdom. It speaks to many, many things such as gender equality, religious tolerance, and above all, it speaks to the rights of each and every individual. What it has failed to do, though, is to allow for ways in which you can, 1, empower, 2, secure by way of funding, maybe for women, 3, present some avenues that allow for some quotas. I used to be of the view that quotas were really not necessary and that we didn't particularly require an affirmative action bill. I watched how political parties tried very hard to reserve some positions even for women, and how that has likewise failed to generate the sort of result that we all want to see. The recent population and housing census has told us that in Ghana we have 400,000 more women than men. That is about 50.7%. It means that for any man to stand and win an election in Ghana, the women folk alone can do that for you. What does this tell us? It tells us first and foremost that we must start to take a second look at women-oriented policies. And when we talk about women-oriented policies, it must start, for example, from the girl child. Unfortunately, that is where most of our problems take place. By the time you get to this level where you are in level 100, 200 and above, it means that you are those who have survived, that you have made it. You are part of the statistics that has actually fed into the gender parity that our country has actually worked very hard to achieve. You are not some of those who fell out because of teenage pregnancies, because of unfair practices, because of lack of access, because of inability of anybody to sponsor or support you, and above all, because you probably fell out for all the other reasons why women somehow do not survive. It is instructive to realize also that since we achieved this parity of both genders at the primary level, what has also happened over the years is that you find that in every academic institution, I don't know about here, you'll find most often than not that the women come tops in most, if not all, the courses of endeavor. So then the question you ask is, are we leaving our men folk behind? What is happening to the male child whilst we've been encouraging the girl child to do more, to preserve herself, to motivate herself, and to get to the next level? The law is beautiful. it actually allows for you to have a certain mindset. It is actually a very versatile profession, and you can have doctors, you can have nurses, name it. I used to have a classmate who was a medical doctor. Immediately after law school, he went back to practice medicine, but at least I'm sure it gave him a better appreciation of what the arts mean to every citizen. It also tries as much as possible to impose upon you a certain modicum of what your civic rights and duties are on any day as an individual. But we also need to start looking at legislations that are progressive. And it is insightful that the Domestic Violence Act in particular was one of such bills. One of the main reasons why that legislation delayed was because there was something to do with marital rape, spousal rape, and men simply couldn't understand how any wife could accuse the husband of rape, especially in the course of a marriage. But as women, we know that that is possible. So it's a very clear distinction between what is important to our men folk and what is important to our women folk. And sometimes it is why bills such as the Affirmative Action Bill is still where it is. And I remember that recently in the last election in 2020, it became a very, 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 active subject matter. But yes, since the elections of 2020, I'm yet to hear that anything has been done in terms of progress regarding the position of this bill. There is enormous patriarchy in our society, where parents, whenever they are confronted with a choice of whether to take the girl to school or the boy or to a better academic institution, then the choice probably would be, okay, take the boy and let the girl do something else. I like the fact that our modern trends have given us opportunities to do other things. I see many young women, professionals, who are engaged in dressmaking, who are baking cakes, who are doing also other things that in the past used to have a certain connotation that the work of the woman or the girl child is just to cook, to sew, to patch the clothes for everybody else, to do the laundry, and all of that. But certainly, modern trends are allowing for parents also to see that whatever that boy child can do, the girls can do, and sometimes they do so even better. I believe that we should actually be, we should hail all of these trailblazers, especially the women who have created these opportunities for all of us today to have conversations such as what we are having this morning. So what you do, no matter what happens, is that as a young woman, you must try as much as possible to stand out. You must represent something. You must build a certain brand for yourself, a certain niche. Create that avenue that allows for people to hear you, know what you have and what it takes. And recently, I've been particularly encouraged by the numbers of female activists in terms of your student elections, SRC, NUGS, for TESCON, for TAIN, name it. And the numbers of young women who have actively taken an interest and are keenly participating in these contests. In the past, you'll find that for all the political activists on campus, it would just be where there's a women's commissioner, then you hear that there's a female. Well, naturally, that was largely reserved for women. I remember years ago when we found that for most political parties, all that you have is, for example, the women's organizer. I think that that is changing too, because we've seen some of these key political parties, for example, that have a general secretary that is female, that have a vice president that is female. In fact, for my party, the NDC in particular, what they did at some point was to reserve some positions in the executive for women. And so certainly some effort and some strides have been made in terms of our politics. But I don't think that that is actually overriding. I don't think it is adequate or that it is enough. I believe that when you start from the position of communities, take for example agric, despite the misogyny, you find out that in most agricultural communities, women are driving agric. Women are farming, women are cultivating all sorts of products, women are adding value, and it runs through most of our communities as a people. And most of our informal economy in particular is largely driven by women. If you go to Makola, for example, you find our mothers and our sisters doing brisk business. And they do have systems of governance in place where you have a market queen who makes sure that the place is kept neat, who ensures that there's security, who ensures that there's a certain communality that allows for each other person to be the other's keeper. So they all owe one another a certain duty of care to be sure that the market is run and run effectively. And that economy actually translates even into the formal economy that we have because of the resources and the contributions that they make in terms of their sales. I recall when the Susu business started, it is actually what developed into and dovetailed into what we came to know as microfinance companies. They were largely small investors from largely the informal sector. Even in terms of tax, you find that most of the districts in particular are run by taxes that are taken from persons within the informal sector and of course from the markets. And I believe strongly that a lot of effort and concentration has been put also on what happens in our markets across the country. And if you've been following the political discourse, you find that there's been serious debates about the state of markets, the security at markets, insurance for market stalls, cleanliness, sanitation, name it, because we all do know that this is a key addition to our value chain. It provides opportunity for us to eat, for us to drink, for us to survive. In fact, in some municipalities, beyond the tax from the market women, there's nothing else. So certainly since time immemorial, women have continued to lead in many categories, not just in the home, because of course you also know that chances are the choice about what happens to children, even in any family, would largely be the responsibility of a woman. So women have always been known to be strong, to be versatile, and to lead many causes in and around the environments in which they operate. So if we come to the decision-making levels, it is imperative and it behoves on each and every one of us to create opportunities, because we know that one of the main reasons why women really do not come as far as they anticipate are usually socio-economic. It might be a lack of access, lack of opportunity, or because some unscrupulous person made her pregnant when she wasn't ready, and she probably could not cope with the baby and with school, and sometimes even due to stigmatization. A young woman falls pregnant, and because of how other children will view this woman, they are forced to leave. We know about things to do with periods, for example. Menstruation is one of the key reasons why young women in rural communities probably do not get to the top where we expect to see them. And so when you hear politicians speak to policies that encourage the removal of taxes on sanitary towels, on free sanitary towels, for example, like we did one when in office years ago, and I do know that this government has also inherited it and has continued with that policy. Many civil society organizations, led by women in particular, are engaged in this particular endeavor and try as much as possible to do things that keep the girl child in school and on track. There is many stereotypes of what a woman should be or shouldn't be. If you're a lawyer, if you're a female, if you're a politician, it means you're a very hard woman. It means you are unyielding. It means you must be someone that is probably usually a very arrogant person, or you come with also connotations about what's really people want to think about a female in that space. There have been many opportunities in politics, for example, where opportunities have come to women, and they'll tell you, I need to consult. They would go and probably not come back. So sometimes when you hear our men folk speak largely to the issues that stop women from going to the next level, it is all of these things sometimes. And remember that mostly these things are led even by women themselves. I know about many socio-cultural practices that keep the girl child away from ever achieving any dreams or having any ambitions, for example. I mean, in some communities, I, for example, come from northern Ghana, and I realize that in some cases, we have all these cultural practices that allow, for example, for young girls to marry very early. In some cases, you have some sort of traditional duties that will prevent a young girl, for example, from going to school. There is also that strong cultural feeling that maybe the girl needs to stay at home or closer to home and shouldn't go to school. Or sometimes there's more emphasis, for example, on the male child than even on the female. Because you also know that we have a certain tradition where it is also men who become chiefs, who rule over the environment and what have you. So yes, these are practices that will somewhat influence or affect the outcomes in terms of what happens to the female or the girl child. I'll be quick to state very carefully that we should not see that a woman's place is only when you lead in terms of politics or you lead in terms of being a member of parliament or an assembly member, etc. We have many women who are currently in science. For example, we have some great female pilots. We have many and several female doctors. We have people of all walks of life, especially women, now occupying many key decision-making areas. But if it is in business, it means that you are a CEO. If it's, for example, in medicine, it means you are a doctor practicing in one clinic or the other. If it's, for example, that you are a businesswoman, it means you have a certain level where you operate. But if you are a female who wants to bring about change, some reforms, some actions, to create a platform for many others such as yourselves to come on board, you will need to have more women at the decision-making level. For the last 20 years, since the 1992 Constitution, for example, each government, both the MPP and the NDC, have tried very hard to have a cabinet with at least 30% positions being held by women, to have a parliament with more women than we have now. But I think when it comes to parliament, this is actually a great improvement on what we used to have before, but it's still not good enough. So certainly when it comes to bills that affect women, that affect our reproductive processes, that affect matters that impact positively or negatively on women, you'll find that at the table where those decisions are being made, very few women are present to influence whatever outcomes are there. So yes, even at that level, you'll still have more men seeing to key decisions that affect women day in and day out. This is why we encourage as many women as are possible and able to come into this space. You know that sometimes we need to actually want change so we can then force society itself to change or make amends. We must want it badly enough. And I remember that when Ethiopia got its new prime minister, he promised that most of his cabinet will be women. And true to form, his prime minister was a female, and yes, there were many other females running the show at the time. If you look at a country like Rwanda, which is suddenly one of Africa's shining examples, they have a national policy that deals with every matter that affects women. Because remember that research has also proven that women are least likely to engage in acts of corruption. That women are always least likely also to fail for transparency and accountable issues. And if you want a job to be done and done effectively, then you certainly should be looking for a woman. But how has this research translated into our politics? Are we to say, for example, that where there are females contesting for office, any type of office, that we should be sure that men do not contest them? Or we should say that we are reserving, in some cases, specific constituencies for women? How have we worked even to impact on the work and lives of these women to ensure that they stay in these categories? When we have female ministers, for example, what sort of support have they enjoyed from our women folk? Now that we know clearly that 50.7% of this population is actually filled by women, it means that women on their own, as a constituency, can actually even topple a government in place if we really intend to do so. So we need to start looking at important interventions, important policies, key policies that will encourage more women into this space. It is interesting, well, because I chose to do my politics through the National Democratic Congress, for example, I can speak largely to examples of great women that we've actually put in place. And I remember that in 2020, when our flag bearer decided to go for a running mate, he picked a former professor of education from the University of Cape Coast, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman. She had actually been in that field, I think, for well over 40 years, and then decided to come into politics. At the time, we had another political party that also had a flag bearer that was a woman, and she was Madame Bridget Jogwenuku. So every effort has been made to raise the level of a woman, even in one of the largest political parties in Ghana, to encourage deeper participation. And I think one of the greatest and lasting legacies that Professor Nana Jane Agyeman would have left, especially seeing as she was one of the first female vice chancellors of a public university, is that beautifully, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology now has a female vice chancellor. In fact, the first 3 at the University of Ghana are all female. And I'm hoping that maybe soon when I come here again, you people might also have similar examples to share of how you have utilized the core constituency of women in terms of leadership and governance of this institution of yours. You can take, for example, what has happened since the pandemic. You'd find the story about countries governed by women and how they handled matters to do with COVID-19. We have great examples from Germany, from the Netherlands, from Canada, from Australia, where we had women prime ministers. And I'm sure you all followed events in Germany when Chancellor Angela Merkel was leaving office as one of the longest-serving female chancellors of Germany. She received a standing ovation, not in a room, but across the country. People opened their windows, their cars. Everybody was excited and gave her a great send-off. And I think that when you applaud, and the applause is this loud, it tells everybody that each and every individual did not only hear, but observe the impact of her leadership qualities as a woman. And I think that these are some positive examples out there for each and every one of us. We need to take a second look at industrialization. And I think that most often than not, we speak to these matters in politics. We speak to them in terms of our policies. And I remember the great Madame Esther Oklu. I don't know how many of you know about the palm in the little bottle or tin. This was one of Ghana's foremost industrialists. And many years after she passed, we still have this product, Kulenu, which still operates till date. We have the fantastic Madame Aide, who actually led GEOC for a long time, a biochemist. And I believe that in her day, it was actually very rare to hear of women who took to such subjects. So it is insightful that today we have young women like you who are all here pursuing courses in the sciences, in technology, in the arts, in math, and what have you. I believe that all these examples are there to tell you that there are better opportunities out there for women in leadership, especially young women. What we expect from you is that you will try as much as possible to lead the change that we all want to see. I mean, even here on campus, there's so much you can do, one, to make your voices heard. You know, people will tell you, and there's an interesting book that is always on my desk about the loss of power, for example, that even if your voice is small enough, you can make it loud enough to be heard. If the power has been taken away from you, you can find another way of getting it back. If your power is in the fact that you are probably top in your class, that gives you enormous leverage. It gives you a great platform. And it means then that you are able to influence just about everything. In fact, if you are as bright as that, you can even challenge a lecturer. And the lecturer will take a deep pause and think about what you just said. So there are many ways that a young woman can make her voice heard, can make herself seen. And I remember years ago, I don't know how successful I've been. Most of our former presidents, upon leaving office, would actually always nominate a male spokesperson or special aide, because most often than not, the minute you become former, immediately you need one person who is out there looking out for your interests, speaking to whatever issues your successors may be raising, and trying as much as possible to find ways to keep, maybe we can say in a very sterile space, your legacy, for example. I work for a man who speaks better for himself than anybody else, and I believe I've taken a thing or two from former President Mahama. And one of the key things I've actually learned to do is that you need not be overly reactive or overly protective. Sometimes issues will play out in a certain way that allows for other people even to make a very informed decision. But what about those occasions where the facts are not as clear? For example, you go to court, you have a matter before you, and you can tell that the evidence is not as straightforward as you anticipated. You have actually started the cross-examination, and whilst you are at it, you are wondering just how you are going to re-examine this person who is before you in the box, because you know that the evidence is shaky. What it means is that when the opposing side stands up, they will punch holes into just about everything that you have tried to elicit from this person in the box through your own evidence. And then what it means is that even long before judgment is given, you know that your facts are very weak and that you are not on terra firma, and chances are you might be losing this case. And nothing worse than your client sitting in court and knowing that my lawyer has not represented me as effectively as he or she should have. And certainly that can generate enormous issues for your credibility, even as representing somebody. Certainly you need always to defend yourselves. You need to speak for yourself in a way that nobody does. You also need to defend yourself in many more ways than one. And when you've gotten used to working in a male-dominated environment like I have, you are battling just about everything. Enormous conflicts, many issues to do with ethics, and even more when you are in a position like we are currently. In government, things might appear slightly smoother. And I remember that in 2016, for example, I was actually spokesperson for the campaign in 2016. I had taken over from the indefatigable Madame Hanatete, who had been spokesperson for many years, pretty much like former President Mahama himself. And I remember that it was not always an easy task. I'd go into some environments, for example, driving through the country, and you'll experience things you had never even thought existed. And for the female, it is even more challenging when you get to a certain environment and all you want is a restroom, as basic as that. Sometimes you get to a place where you think, okay, you might find a smooth, quiet place, but there's so many men around. In moments like that, you need to think very deep within you. But you see, the beauty about this is that when your male counterparts know that there's just you amongst us, you see how men suddenly behave very well when they're in the midst of just one female. It's different when the numbers are equal. But when there's just one and everybody tries to pamper you and everybody tries to accommodate you, they do make a great effort. And I must confess, I work with some very great and amazing men. So it was not always an easy environment. And I remember sometimes we would go for some of these debates, and I was relatively a very young politician at the time, certainly not as experienced, but of course, I've made some great strides over the years. And you'll find some of the men, literally, sometimes they'll say stuff, and I'll balk, because I'd ask myself, how on earth can I possibly repeat something like that? For example, when we tried to stem and reduce insults in our environment, I remember. You'd go for a program and you find the then opposition struggling for power, and the things they could say, they would even go as far as weeping, and mostly there were men on that side. And I'd sit there very calmly, and I'd still just say it as forcefully I wanted to say it. If any of you here follow me, you'd know that I write a lot. I comment on a lot of social issues. I've tried very hard to stay very true to my own personal principles and ideals as a person. And one thing that I do not tolerate, and I disabuse everybody's mind of it, is to be rude, to be intolerant, to be caustic, and to reduce every debate that you can come into insults. And it is why I always come back to this position that lawyers are still one of the most disciplined professionals you'd find in this space. Because if you stood up in court and you said something rude, you even as much as made a certain reference about the ethics of your colleague on the other side, be they a senior or junior, you'd find that immediately the judge will take you on. In fact, the lawyer on the other side would stand up and take you on for that. I believe that most of you follow parliamentary proceedings, and even when people are referred to without the right titles or prefixes, immediately the other would stand up and say, please, this is the correct rendition of my name. It is something we need to remember. But sometimes, irrespective of the fact that you are female and you come across all of these things, you also need to find ways that you ensure that people know that you're a very disciplined person and you will not take any underhand comments or unsavory comments from anybody. So for instance, I am at a program and there's a gentleman there with me. He walks in straight away and then he says to me, oh, you know, I'm sure all you do is watch these telenovelas, and so when you come here, you probably will not know that when we come to these matters, this is how we do them, etc. In fact, this was a very older gentleman. So I looked at him and I said, you know something? Don't allow the stereotypes that you've gotten used to and, gotten carried away by, encourage you to think that every female you meet is the same. I said, that story you're talking about, I have no clue what it's about. I watch very little or no television at all. And if you wanted to pass a comment such as that, the manner in which you've done it sounds very, very sexist and is totally unacceptable. He was quite offended. But I realized that everybody gave me applause, even if not loudly. Recently, I met another gentleman like that, and then he says, oh, your husband must be having a very hard time with you. And I said, yes, if my husband behaved like you, he certainly would be having a hard time. But my husband will never meet another person's wife or sister and pass a comment like that. So yes, there are times when you would have to put people, no matter who, in their places. But even then, you can still do it and do it effectively, do it nicely, and even be polite about it. There are times when you say something very subtly to somebody, it makes them sit up and they think about it. But you have not been rude, you have not been insulting. And I believe that we mostly try too hard to play our cards as victims. And in most of my relationships, especially for the young ladies that I mentor, one thing I say to young women is that, as much as possible, don't play victim. Even if it comes to strength, the Bible will tell you that maybe the male is a lot stronger than the female, but I believe that where you are having polite debates or conversations, there is a way that you can still come out much stronger than even your sex may allow you to be. But in all of this, you must first and foremost remember that discipline is key, especially in a male-dominated environment. If you allow for people to walk over you once, they'll do it a second time, they'll do it a third time. There's a conversation that has raged largely about you young women presently in terms of videos and WhatsApp and all of that, where unfortunately you share some very personal videos of yourself with a young man or woman, and then you find that they've actually put it on the internet or shared it with other people. Recently, I had the opportunity to tell a young lady that all you need to do is to be strong enough, confident enough, and if you take such a matter to court, you will get all that you require and more. In fact, you will even get your dignity back. The only portions will be portions where you might have to speak to some embarrassing facts about yourself. But once you share these videos, those persons have no right whatsoever to use them for any other thing other than the purpose for which you shared them. But yes, in the same vein, I'll be the first to tell you, be very careful who you share these very personal things with. Because most of our men folk can also be very, very unscrupulous. And it is why when it comes to work environments, student environments, relationships, integrity is important. ethics are even more important. Respecting each other's privacy will take you to the next level. So certainly be women, but be as effective as you can be. Eschew the notion that the world is full of men. Yes, it is. But you know that the numbers speak differently to that matter. So you'll find that even though everybody thinks that it is a male-dominated environment, there's actually more women than men. So it depends on how you position yourself, what you do, and you know, sometimes, only because we are speaking in an academic environment today, there are some amazing women who probably have had no formal education and have led communities, built huge businesses, and have currently actually tried to share their stories to impact on the lives of many of us who are very well learned and probably have had good formal education. So it is not always the case that it's only when you acquire a certain level of education that you need to have your voice heard. In fact, if you remember, prior to the 1992 Constitution being promulgated, then Chairman Rawlings had consulted all types of people from all walks of life, from the markets, from the farms, name it. So when you pick up that Constitution, it contains enormous native wisdom. Equality, it preaches beautifully. Rights, it preaches beautifully. Freedom of speech, it guards jealously. Separation of powers between the executive and the judiciary and parliament and the fourth estate, all of them very clearly delineated. And yet it still enjoins everybody else to take the preservation and protection of another human being's rights very, very seriously. Because we all know that the minute you leave, whatever rights you enjoyed will be enjoyed by somebody else. And everything you say may or may not have a trickle effect, might even affect somebody in so many ways. So it is actually an obligation, erga omnes, on each one of us to be sure that we do not only preserve our own rights as a person, but that you defend even the rights of others. And this is not because necessarily you are a lawyer or other. It is just because it is a rule of thumb, and it is how we are expected to live. So, distinguished brothers and sisters, I think sometimes the conversations are very, very long. They can sometimes be arduous. But research tells us one thing, that a world full of women will certainly build a better balance, deliver more on equality, and even allow also for many more people to come into this space. Remember also that it's also a partnership. So, for example, all those stereotypes. Oh, you know, if a woman is a judge, if she's a lawyer, if she's a pilot, she can't have a husband. You know, no man wants to be with her. Oh, well, she probably won't have any kids, or she has kids and all of that. Or, well, she's not married, but she has a son or a daughter. All those things really don't matter. They don't really stop you from being who you want to be. I think all that really matters is that, one, we must first and foremost respect one another. There's a lady I know very well who always speaks to these issues to do with men and women. And she says, look, in whatever we do, we need the support of our men, our brothers, our colleagues. For example, if you were to stand for student elections, you will need them to help you campaign. You will need their support to win. You will need their votes to take you to the next level. So by all means, there will always be a certain overlap, a certain correlation. The only reason why we accept topics such as this one is that, yes, there's a certain paucity of women in this space, but there's also a certain leverage that you can build on if you are a woman and you are in this space. What we need to remember is that it is not just here in Ghana or in Africa. In many countries the world over, we struggle to secure equal opportunities for both men and women. In America, for example, men are known to do the same job as women and yet earn more. Maybe because they put in more hours. Maybe because they don't have kids that need to go to school. Maybe because they have a partner at home who takes care of their children and they can work more. In fact, in America, until recently, if you went home to have a baby, by the time you return, you may either have to take a demotion or take a different job, or in fact, even lose your job completely. So you find most women in those days will work until they're about a day or two from having a baby before they leave and go home. We need to work very hard to bridge all of these gaps. In Ghana, the research is scanty, but yes, most often than not, HR practitioners will be quick to tell you they are happy to recruit men any day. And whenever they see youngish women, in particular like you leaving university fresh, they are reluctant because first, very soon you'll be getting married, soon you start a family. So there's always this ambivalence about all of these things. So yes, you might leave school with a first class, with your male counterparts, all of you very bright and fresh out of school, certainly looking forward to a bright future. But you find that because of these stereotypes, the work environment will somehow leave you behind whilst it carries the male ahead. It is what has created this impression of this dominance. It might be more perception even than real, but it happens. For example, we are looking for economists. We are looking for mathematicians. And I'm sure if we all follow the National Science and Math quiz, it has done something for women beyond any advertisement that I have ever seen, is that we have these young, promising, bright, brilliant young women. And I remember the late professor, I forget her name, from Legon, who started that National Science and Math quiz thing. She was a fantastic female, but in her day, she was just on her own. It is beautiful and a testimony to her legacy that we have these young women who have actually revived it. The spelling bee is led by another female, very strong, very confident, very certain of what they are doing. So you find that in whatever little space you find yourself in, there is a certain touch that comes only from the females. There's a certain leadership quality. Take, for example, even in your own homes. Even as young children, you find the girl child leads the home most of the time. So by the time you are probably a teenager, you know exactly what to and what not to do and how to do it. I'm happy to read now that men don't complain too much when they have more girls than boys, because now you know that whatever legacy it is you want to leave, that the girl child can do just as well as the boy child, maybe sometimes even better. And so certainly that is a great improvement also on some of our very antiquated cultural practices. So in all of these conversations, I believe strongly that politics is where great conversations regarding our development, our economy, our socioeconomic issues, our progress, even where our vision for our country's development will be secured and cemented. It is a reason why we clamor all the time for more females to come into this space, especially at the decision-making level. Today, we have a speaker and 2 deputies, and all 3 of them are men. The majority and minority leaders are both men. But I remember that in days gone by, we had a female speaker. She was a former Supreme Court judge. She was fantastic. Her ladyship, Joyce Bawah Ado of blessed memory. She carried the job and carried it beautifully and efficiently. So it tells you that in as much as our conversations have brought us this far, in pretty much the same way, some things have remained the same. That people see nothing wrong with 3 key persons at the helm of affairs in Parliament, which is actually the main law-making body that we have. When you come into this country and you want to pick up on news about Ghana, your first point of call will be to find out what is happening in Parliament. So I think these are conversations that we should continue to have. I remember recently I saw an article by the United Nations office here in Ghana, and they said they were going to say no to panels that did not have female representation. I thought that was fantastic. I climbed onto that bandwagon because I'm one of those who believe strongly that irrespective of where we are, what we do, and how we do it, we ought to have panels that reflect the numbers of women that we have in our society. In job placements, we need to have numbers that reflect the number of women that we have. And I think it is time even for institutions of learning such as yours to start to create avenues that actually allow for women to thrive or participate equally with their men folk. At least that way, we will start to train a different kind of leader, a different future, one where men and women actually hold one another and hold the doors for each other and see themselves more as partners than as competitors, see themselves more as equals than as one being stronger than the other, and see themselves more as citizens first before you start to look at yourselves as either man or woman. I have actually personally stood out because I believe in excellence. I champion excellence. I live, I breathe, and dream excellence. I imagine a future where each individual will build a certain attitude, very positive, that allows you to take yourself from one place to the other. And if you are able to do this successfully, you are even able to rebrand and reposition yourself. I am a female politician who did not make it to parliament. I didn't even try to contest. There were conversations about me finding a seat and all of that, but somehow I wasn't too sure that I had the heart for it. I stayed in my lane. Politics ends because we are in opposition, but I have still found expression. In my free times, I practice law. In my spare time, I find platforms such as yours to engage with young people. In times when I'm busy and probably thinking about myself, I'll write many articles and share them. I'll try as much as possible to mentor other young people, both men and women. I try to do some social engagements, for example. Reach out, help other people. Just try as much as possible to affect and impact your community as best as you can. You certainly can't do it all, but you can do it in a way that allows you to become that representative voice that allows for young women such as you to use me as your example, to emulate the example that I believe I have carved for myself, because nobody will give that to you. You will have actually to rise up, step up to the table, and take it for yourself, for example. You know, a few days ago, I met a gentleman who said, "Oh, Joyce, why? We don't see you on television and this." And I said, "Oh, you know, I have a young family and I think my time has changed a bit. And so sometimes I just get very, very busy or I'm a touch preoccupied." Then he says, "Oh, you know, I just enjoy the way you go about these things because, you know, nobody speaks for President Mahama like you do." And I said, "Oh, well, except for himself." And we all laughed. So it does give you a certain modicum of comfort that in whatever it is that you do or that you seek to do, you have at least created a certain positive space that is all yours. There must be something that makes you unique, something that allows you to represent a certain constituency that probably doesn't even exist, that you probably cannot even name. Imagine how the National Science and Math Quiz simply changed and suddenly started to take everybody by storm, simply because they now had these smart women being the quiz mistresses. We do have a certain touch. And I believe that even where you are female and you are the underdog and you are the less stronger of the two and all of that, there is a way that you achieve strength because you have built a certain attitude into your life. So take it, for example, that you have no power, that nobody is going to pick you up and give you anything. How would you do that for yourself? I saw a young lady yesterday on a program. I was just glancing through something. She's only 9 years old and has actually written 2 or 3 books. Fantastic little girl. So there's just so much you can do. And I mean, this generation is blessed. There's nothing as sporadic or spontaneous as the internet. And yesterday I had a conversation with a gentleman from the British High Commission. What they do now is that they have students from rural schools, for example, who engage virally with students from the US, from the UK, and many of these developed countries. What it tells you is that you can even begin to dream and imagine yourselves in that space. But at least you here don't have these challenges. I've been to some great institutions of learning. That's one thing I've actually acquired over the years. You know, being in shipping, I tended to travel a lot in my old job. And since I've been working with President Mahama, I've visited a lot of institutions of learning. I've been to the famous Harvard University. I've been to Oxford. I've been to Cambridge. And I must confess that this room of yours competes beautifully with all the best facilities that I have seen. So genuinely, you have no excuse. I mean, you have absolutely no excuse. And the numbers of the women here are equally encouraging. There's a beautiful business school called Kellogg that I went to once, and I remember that the seating was almost like this. It's actually one of the leading business schools in the United States of America. And I think that you have nothing to lose. Build yourself, build a good resume, work on your attitude. By all means, be respectful, but believe more in the equality of a man to the woman. And remember that you can still have it all. Be a mother, be a wife, be an aunt, be a sister, and still be a great professional. And every day I see Professor Nana Jane Najima. This is one of the things that I admire most about Professor Nana. How she relates to people of all walks of life, irrespective of age. And recently I had an interesting conversation because a traveler had met President Mahama on a flight. And to her utter surprise, he was actually carrying his own bag. I had actually gone for a funeral far away in the Upper East region. So she called me. Joyce, where are you? I said, I'm at a funeral. I just met President Mahama and he's carrying his own bag. Why are you not with him? He said, don't worry, even if I'm with him, most often than not, he'll carry his bag and he'll carry mine. It is just his nature. So sometimes, irrespective of the public space too that we occupy, it is also important that you remember that the adulation will not always be there. The crowds might not always be around you, but you can still build within yourself a certain crowd that may not be something people can see or even be palpable. But because it is an innate thing, it is only you who feels it. Someone asked me, but Joyce, where is your police? Where is your... I said, I never really use any of those. I never had a policeman even when I was in office. It was just something I wasn't used to. I actually only got used to a driver a few years ago because I realized suddenly that I had so many things to do at a point. Sometimes I'm on the phone, I'm typing, I'm trying to read something. So yes, when you have a driver, it takes your mind off and then you can sit in and do other things. But even with the driver, he's your partner. So you ought also to continue to give him some respect so that at least he's encouraged and able to continue to support you. And in fact, it's no longer about drivers who just hold the steering wheel. He must be able to go on Google Maps and find directions to places. Run errands for you, for example, to the bank. Be friends with your kids, like in my case, and pick your children up from school and do other things just to augment your life. So for us as individuals, even when you're a woman, there is a certain partnership. Because, for example, I am in politics. My husband is a research person. There's just no way that he will have time to drive me around or follow me around or even pick kids up from school. I don't even expect him to do it. And when he does, I'm actually always very grateful. But I don't ask. But it doesn't take anything away from him being a great father and a great partner. You understand? Not everybody's relationship will be the same. And if you find yourself in a very competitive relationship, for example, where you are both high flyers. I married a very, very, serious person who is very research-oriented and very calm. He can work for 12 hours at a go. I can be in the house the whole day and probably not have even one sentence until his day is over. But somehow it has also kept me grounded because I find that I'm able to do a lot more in terms of my academic exploits, and I find time to write, to read, and do many other things that other people are unable to do. So certainly build a very balanced life. But remember also that it is also about you. And most women will tell you, but madam, The men will not support you when you want to do this. Fake news. Find one who will. Oh, but madam, I've got like 2 kids. Nobody wants to marry me. Fake news. I know a man who married a woman with 4 children. Oh, but madam, these days, these jobs don't want to employ women. When you walk in and you're a woman, you're not too interested. Wrong. In fact, there's just that job that just wants a woman, and they'll tell you, I don't want a man. I want just a female. Then there's all those stereotypes. Oh, I don't want to be a bus driver or a police officer. It's too bosh. You have to wear trousers all the time. Says who? You are not yet a police officer. You're in school, but most of you, I can tell, are in trousers. Oh, stop wearing those high heels. You women, it would worry your knees. I said, my mom is 81. She wore these heels till she was about 65. Now she can't even wear even 1 inch. I'm wearing them till I can no longer stand on them. So it makes you happy. I love the new thing about all of us keeping our natural hair. It's beautiful. Nothing stops you from doing that. That's what represents how you feel. It takes you everywhere. You can be a member of parliament. You can be a minister, all of that. And still be as natural as you want to be. Makeup is great, and nothing tells you that if you are bright and smart, you shouldn't wear makeup. It's fake news. You want to feel as good as you think. If makeup is what will do it for you, please do it and do it happily. So my brothers and sisters, I think that I have said it all. And to put it mildly, I think that you guys represent a microcosm of what our future looks like, of where we want to be and where we want to go to. And if everybody tells you that religion is a reason to hold you back, it's fake news. If anybody tells you that being female is bad and will not take you to the next level, it's fake news too. All you have to do as a young woman or man is that first, build some very good principles and virtues. Your integrity, accountability, punctuality, honesty, your sincerity, your commitment, your hard work, your loyalty. If your boss knows that you are loyal, they will go places with you. As for the usual misconceptions about women not being their own enemies and all of that, yes, they will continue happening, but it doesn't take anything away from you. You just take it in your stride and continue to believe in yourself. I encourage you to act like yourself, not like others. And if you want to be great also, you must also be a servant to everybody else. So I do hope that, like me, you are happy to serve. And I'm always pleased to join people like you because I don't see this as a job. I think I'm just serving. And all I have to serve day in, day out is a positive example of what a woman or man in politics should be like. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sharing your time with me. And hopefully I can take some questions and answers, and then we'll engage again another time. Thank you, and God bless you all.
All right, so that was a really interesting conference we just had. But I just want to clarify some things. In this modern day and age that we are in, universally, there are 2 genders, male and female, universally. Now, you see, the thing is that although we're different in terms of, physical attributes, we all have the same mental attitudes and attributes. So, in terms of corruption and other things, yes, men can be corrupt, women can also be corrupt. You know what I'm saying? Just that one gender is more closely attributed to its attitudes, all the other to its physical attributes. Like, there are many examples of women who have been very corrupt. And I've even scarred the world because of that. So I'm just saying that maybe it was inaccurate to say that, women are least likely to be corrupt, because although we don't hear of it, it happens. Yeah, I can even give you examples of it. Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much. I think that this is just writing the status quo. But yes, this was actually born out of a research study that I'd seen. And I'm sure if you Google it, you'll still have the information there, and then maybe we can have another debate about this. But certainly, I will take nothing away from your comment. I think it makes sense. And it's just because the topic this morning is actually to do with women in a male-dominated environment. So it is to encourage the women to do more. Of course, the men have been in charge for well over 60 years, at least across the world. So you must be doing something right. But you can do more, and I think that if you had a good balance, then maybe you achieve a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, any other person?
With the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the goals is to have gender equality. Yeah, and as you said, women and compared to males have to work together. Like, I want to talk about the rights. So you see, right now, the aim is gender equality, but it seems that females get more rights than males. So my question to you is that in a modern day and age, how can we have equality if one gender has more rights than the other?
I think what we are trying to build here is to build a balance where you have just as many women as there are men. I think that the idea is not necessarily to disadvantage any group of them. And I'm sure if you listened, I said earlier that in times past when we achieved parity in the girl child, especially at the primary level, there were questions about the fact that we appeared to be leaving the male child behind. So something had to be done to ensure that there was an equitable distribution in terms of the numbers. I believe that in many of these things, Ghana has actually achieved a certain modicum of parity. But certainly there's still more male factors across the length and breadth of our industries, a lot more than women. And so I think that all the conversations we have generally in this space is actually to encourage women. You know, I like your confidence. I'm sure many of the young women here probably have a lot more questions, but maybe they don't want to speak and they are not used to being as assertive or speaking as they want to. So it tells you that even in this room, I like that approach. And I tell my students all the time that it's fantastic when you have that one student who asks questions all the time, to the point where whenever he or she raises their hands, people start going, oh, not you again. But I think it should be you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's put our hands together for her.